let us talk about the
Mhm.
fog.
Yes.
What did you think? I'm gonna
I
go
really
with you
enjoyed
on
it.
this one.
I enjoyed it, but like I said, I wish there was more of it.
Mm-hmm.
The I the this most disappointing part of it is just when I kind of wanted the hat to kind of drop like big time, where like the whole town is attacked by the fog, and
Mm-hmm.
not really just like these group of five people.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that was more it was gonna be like. That's why I thought the setup at the beginning it was like showing off the grocery store and the church, and I thought it was kind of a setup for when shit goes down later.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more just an atmosphere thing, I guess. But I really enjoyed it. So just generally,
Yeah, it's another John Carpenter classic in my opinion.
yeah, I thought
It
the
definitely stood
cinematography,
up to what I
yeah,
thought. So this was okay. So to give a little history on this movie for me, my first ever horror movie was Amityville Horror, but I didn't make it very far. I made it to the point where the dog gets axed, and that was when I was younger, and it scared the shit out of me. So I never watched another horror movie for a very long time because they scared the shit out of me. I just don't do it anymore. Or not anymore. Now I do, but for a long time it took me some nerve to get back into like watching horror. Like my dad would like kind of like tease me and be like, "Oh, you want to watch this?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm not interested." So The Fog was actually my gateway back into horror, believe it or not. My
oh,
dad had picked it up on like DVD or something for cheap at like Walmart one time. It was in one of those like $4
yeah,
bins or
yeah,
something.
uh-huh.
And he was like, "Oh, we should watch this." And I like even this one, believe it or not, because of the fear that like still was embodied from me from Amityville, which we had talked about during our horror movie thing. So I won't like go too far into it. I was actually still afraid of this movie. Even, I mean, I wasn't like super old. I was probably like maybe 10, 11, maybe 12,
Yeah.
pushing 12, when I watched this. But this was definitely my gateway. And then after this, from there, I realized that slowly over time that my fear was not necessary and that they're just movies. So I outgrew my imagination, and thus I got over it. But so that this movie kind of has like a little like a touch in my history of horror movies. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a classic for me to watch. But I do have to agree. So personally, going off of the thing you talked about with the fact that like the movie just ended kind of I wouldn't say it ended abruptly for me. For me, I feel like
No,
I
it
got
was.
closure in the story. It's just
Uh-huh.
I wish there was more of a build up with like what you had discussed, like more
Well,
going on in the town, stuff like that. Like
I
they could have
think
played with the fog more.
yeah, I think the buildup was actually fine. I just
Mhm.
think when shit actually hit the fan, that was like a third of the movie
Mhm.
compared to two-thirds of it being build up, you know?
Mhm. The
So I feel it's a
climax
little
needed a little bit more time.
yeah, I think if I had to guess, just budgetary reasons, probably why it couldn't be some spectacular thing. Because
Mhm.
it still seems pretty, I know he probably could have gotten more of a budget than he did for Halloween after the success of Halloween, but it still seems kind of relatively like low budget, like a mid-budget movie for its time. Um, so it's just it's an interesting movie. I think the cinematography is probably the most interesting part about it when it's like real. It is really dark, like in an unconventional dark kind of way. Because sometimes when it's like really dark in a movie, or when it's supposed to be dark in a movie, it's actually like oh, it's movie dark, where you can still see everything, but it kind of just has the idea of darkness, like where everything's like yeah. So,
Mhm.
but in this movie, it's like some scenes it is like pitch black and realistic almost lighting where you only
Oh yeah.
see like bands of lights like coming through the leaves or something while they're driving on the road.
Mhm.
And I think the lighting was one of the best parts of it. I love when like the doors would open and it would have that giant spotlight like shining through the fog and
Yes.
it could, like completely envelop the like whoever is standing at the door. Uh, I thought that was great. I thought all the atmosphere is really good.
Mhm.
The score helps with that. I just think the fog itself is a good device for atmosphere because it's like this kind of like slow encroaching thing that completely envelops you and you can't run away from it almost.
Mhm.
I mean, they did run away from it, but it's kind of like feels like it's just like surrounding you.
Mhm.
Uh,
It is. It's like
I,
a very ominous like thing
mhm,
on its own. So like the idea that it like they set up this whole thing of like oh it's moving away from the direction of the wind, which is
mhm,
abnormal. Like oh it's picking up speed. Like that's not abnormal, but like when it is going against the direction of the wind, it's definitely abnormal for it to suddenly start picking up speed.
mhm.
let alone the fact that it is going the opposite direction. So it kind of like it definitely builds this atmosphere. And then also going off of your budget, I just looked it up. So budget for Halloween was actually $325,000, and then the
Mhm.
budget for the fog was actually 1 million.
Oh wow, they didn't give him that much more then. Okay.
No, not really.
Yeah.
So
But I really like the location. I know you said they shot in Canada, which is very common
yep.
for films to be shot in Canada just because of tax breaks. Uh, but I thought it was really really cool. Like where that like her radio station was. I think you were like muted or something, but I said like, oh look at this location with like the stairs going down. I thought that was like really cool.
Yeah, like
Um,
in the lighthouse and all that. Yeah,
mhm.
very cool.
I think one of the weaker spots, I guess, was just the characters. Like, if you were to ask me right now the name of any character, I could tell you the name of the kid because she says, "Andy, you gotta run,
Yeah,
Andy."
yeah.
That's it. I don't know anybody else's names.
I know Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Okay, yeah,
That
there you
was
go.
that was
Was the guy's name Dave or something?
Jamie.
I think it was
Uh
Dave.
Maybe it was Dave.
It's just like, yeah, it's a common problem with horror movies, especially early ones. Like
Hmm.
John Carpenter, had almost, along with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just established the like, slasher genre a couple of years ago. So
Hmm.
this whole type because this movie does give off a lot of slasher vibes. Like
Oh
whenever
yeah.
somebody is killed, it's just done in a very slasher like way, where it's like, oh, shot of the hook, and then their eyes looking up at it, and then the impact, like very very formulaic slasher kind of kills.
Hmm.
Um,
The camera
so
angles were really cool too on it. I mean, obviously, yeah, they were like
yeah, I
definitely
just
calling back
wish,
to some of the slashing from Halloween as
yeah,
well, but
I just wish there was more creative ways they were killed. It kind of seems like every time somebody just gets hooked or stabbed,
hmm.
like at least in like Halloween, there's that, when he like she opens the door or something and somebody's hanging from it, and like kind of
Oh
these
yeah.
cool,
Yeah.
like I think the closest thing it got to that was when I love the fake scare with the locker when they're on the boat, and then she's like, oh my god, and then the real scare happens like almost immediately afterwards, with the body like slumps over on her. I thought that was a good scare. um But yeah, I just felt there wasn't a really a character I could latch onto, maybe besides the woman who is the radio broadcaster. It's like the closest thing you could get to
Hmm.
maybe a main character. Which I'm not saying you necessarily need a main character, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, it does. Having
Um,
someone that you can kind of like look at and be like, relay like the story through. If you have a connection, it kind of creates a more dramatic appeal. Although I still felt like the the atmosphere and stuff that was built in it, definitely like kind of stood up for a little bit, like
mhm,
on its own. Like I
yeah,
agree that there wasn't a character because I also can't really remember any of the names besides the one from Jamie Lee Curtis because I think the only reason why I remember Elizabeth being her name is because right away we heard that and I made fun of it. Like if I hadn't
yeah,
made fun of it, I probably would have just forgotten about it. And then like you said, Andy, that's the only other one, right? So
yeah,
like everyone else is kind of like just there. Um,
mhm,
which feels kind of weird, but like I still don't feel like I missed anything in the movie. You know what I mean? Which is kind
yeah.
of weird because like in any other movie, I feel like that would be an issue.
Yeah,
So,
it's not really the focus,
hmm,
so it's kind of easy to give it a pass. I
the story
think you're
wasn't bad. I like
Yeah,
the
it was
story
okay.
idea.
Yeah.
For a slasher film, the whole idea that like the town took basically like set these guys up to go die and then took their money in order to build the church and build the town, and now they're coming back for like redemption or
Mhm.
like revenge basically to get their money back. Like I thought that was interesting. I also don't mind like the whole ending thing because I don't know. Like a lot of movies would have just had that priest die right away, they would have gotten their gold back, and then they would have pulled out. Instead, they do this kind of like fake where like they pull out, they got the gold, and you're like, oh, the priest gets to live. So maybe he was just after the gold the entire time, and then all of a sudden, at the very end, he's like
Yeah.
questioning why he didn't die, and he gets
Yeah,
killed.
I mean, it's kind of like, when I said the end, or is it? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a cliche thing, but I enjoyed it. It was nice. I think just if I like I feel like most of the problems I have with it don't really like bring it down too much because I just really like this kind of movie. I just have a
Mm.
personal bias to John Carpenter and the movies he's made. So I still really enjoy this movie, but I think I could argue it being kind of one note because I think the atmosphere is great, but it really doesn't evolve beyond that for the
No,
most
it
part.
doesn't. You're right.
It's very consistent, but you need to ramp up. And I felt like it was just kind of not really a flat line, but not much movement as far as like evolving the pacing or the
Hmm.
atmosphere in any specific way.
I agree. I think it would have been more interesting for him to like maybe possibly use like there was that point when they were in the car and we were questioning whether or not the car was gonna get stopped and the score started picking
Yeah,
up.
because then it would have given again
Like
like
it would
the
have
things we set
given
up
it
at the
more interesting.
beginning. They could have gone to the grocery store, the gas
Hmm.
station, whatever. Like I think just because they spend an hour building to this. We see some people get killed, like we
Hmm.
get to see the sailors get killed, but that's like about it, as far
That's
as
true.
actual things happening.
There was actually no
Uh,
callback either to like the gas station or to the
no,
grocery store, which is kind of weird because when you think about it, especially the gas station, there was a lot of gasoline that just got poured onto the ground. You would think like
yeah,
that might become like a callback later on, like they're running away and all of a sudden that just like lights up into
mhm,
it like a huge massive fireball or something like that. You know what I mean? Like a
yeah,
big fire or something, or you know what I mean? Like
yeah. I
anything could
guess
have been a
yeah,
callback,
it was
but
just trying to show that something's weird with the town, which it did a
yeah.
perfect job.
Oh,
I
it
think
definitely did.
the opening might be the best part of the movie, if you ask me, honestly.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, but as far as like where it ranks among other John Carpenter movies I've seen, I feel like it's kind of here. Maybe I need to pull up a list.
Yeah, let's get the list.
Uh, yeah, see what John Carpenter's done. But I think it's probably like middle of the pack is for me. Nothing like amazing, but it's not like bad or something like
Where's
that.
Halloween for you, just out of curiosity? In that in your list,
Above the fog, yeah.
it would be above
Like,
the fog game.
yeah.
I agree.
It's just based off influence alone. I think also we were talking about characters to latch onto. I think the character that Jamie Lee Curtis plays in that movie
Mm-hmm.
is
Laurie Strode is so
lot
easy to
more
connect to.
compelling than any character in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't
Uh,
agree more.
and he's got a big filmography.
It was actually kind of strange that you would think like Jamie Lee Curtis being in this movie, he would have put her back into a leading role, and I know we discussed that, but just kind of interesting, you know, because
Hmm.
she really did just kind of play like a backup or like a secondary role, you know what I mean? Because in a
What was the
way,
movie?
the
All right,
what
keep going. Sorry.
in a way the lighthouse woman and then the guy that found Jamie Lee Curtis are probably the two most major characters in that entire movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then Jamie Lee Curtis is just kind of there as like a
Yeah.
lover
I
to
wonder
the
if she
guy.
had more of a role and then it just got cut for some reason.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. So a movie I actually haven't seen by John Carpenter is his very first one, his first feature with which is Dark Star, which is a sci-fi movie.
Hmm,
I've heard it's pretty good though.
really?
Yes, I need to watch that eventually. Where is it?
Maybe we should watch that for our next one.
I've seen Assault on Precinct 13. That's pretty. It's okay. Halloween's good. Escape from New York, I like a lot.
I haven't seen that one
Christine. I
actually.
haven't seen Christine actually.
Oh, you haven't seen Christine? That's another good
No.
one. I do like Christine.
The thing is just has to be my top of all time for John Carpenter,
Yep.
based of a personal bias. I love Big Trouble in Little China. They Live.
I love's good too.
I need to see Prince of Darkness. Um,
I haven't seen that one.
but yeah, I'd say like The Fog, kind of maybe like lower middle of the pack as far as
Hmm.
John Carpenter movies I've seen. I would say the bottom for me is probably Assault. Actually, if you count Escape from L.A., I would put that at the bottom. And then Assault on Precinct 13. Um, so yeah, I think it's a very decent movie, but I can kind of see why people are very on it.
I think
From
it
what I've
depends on
heard.
your like your
Yeah.
personality, you know.
Hmm.
Someone like you or someone like me that like we really enjoy like the early slasher, like the campy horror movie, like those kind of like retro horrors that kind of like
Hmm.
built kind of the structure of everything else. I kind of feel like, you know, we kind of give it a little bit more credit. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But some
Yeah.
people would probably
Personally, I
sit
just
there and
yeah,
pick
I
out
enjoy it
like
more.
they
Yeah.
would sit there and really definitely sit there and be like, oh, like this is really, like we discussed, like the one note might really throw people. Like I could see that being a big deal.
Yeah, but it's not a long movie, so the
No,
one
it's
note
not.
being a problem is not that big of a deal because it's really short and concise.
If it was like a
Yeah,
2 hour movie and you had to sit
yeah,
through another like 30 minutes of just these 5 or 6 people being chased around by the fog the entire time, without very like any like really crazy abrupt
variation.
changes
Yeah,
or
yeah.
variation, I could see where that would be longing. However, if they added 30 minutes and they made it like all of a sudden the city was enveloped in fog,
Mhm,
that would have been cool. Which I thought actually, so I didn't really quite remember this because it's been a while since I've seen this. Um, so I was kind of still like waiting for that moment, even like halfway through, because there was the whole buildup of the fog, and she's like, "Oh, it's moving past the beach. Oh, it's moving down the streets." You know what I mean?
mhm.
It wasn't until like I remembered that they all end up in the church at the end that I was like, "Oh shit, that's right." Like that's where it ends, which I mean is cool if it ended there anyways, because it would have made sense with the story. But I think it would have been cooler if they added in the extra 30 minutes right there when they're like trying to run away from this fog and stuff. And the fog is actually like enveloping the city, like we talked about. Like when
Yeah,
they're all in their cars trying to run away from it, I think it would have been cool that like all of a sudden, like we had said, like their cars shut down and then they're running through like the grocery stores and like all these other things that maybe it still follows them. Like I don't know. I think it would have been cooler to kind of show like the people at the candlelight uh like procession like
yeah.
having
Nothing
issues
happened
too.
with that.
Yeah, I thought
What
there was gonna be
like?
some stuff there.
I
Like
thought the fog was gonna show up and they're all gonna be holding their candles in the fog, like trying to see through it. I was
yeah.
really disappointed now that you mentioned it that nothing happened with that. I thought that was a big setup.
hmm
Like I was waiting for something to happen with that.
So I think it would have been cool for like 30 minutes to kind of fill in right there and like really just harass the town. And
Mhm.
then when they
Yeah.
come out of that extra 30 minutes, then they end up at the church and like all, the ending happens. And I think that would have really just made this movie. But again,
Mhm.
it's not big enough that like I'm sitting back like, oh, like that was not a good movie.
Mhm.
Like I still think it was really solid.
Yeah.
And the cinematography was pretty decent, I gotta say. Like we talked about it. There was a few hiccups here and there with certain things, mainly VFX and stuff like that. But like,
Yeah.
um, you know,
Yeah.
that's not easy in the '80s, anyways. So
No.
again, you gotta kind of give them credit because
Yeah.
the fog doesn't look like janky for the most part. There's a
No,
couple
no,
times
no, it
where you
doesn't.
look at the
Yeah.
fog and it looks like just like a green blur on the screen, where I'm kind of like, that's a little weird.
Yeah. Also, just it seems like I mean, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like the quality of this scan was just not the greatest whenever it was done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure because like in order to get the best quality scan, you want to go and get the negatives and scan that. But
Mm-hmm.
depending on whether or not the negatives are still out there or whether there's even a demand to do a rescan because technically if you had even a copy like even a not a negative but like a film copy you could still do a scan of that and it would probably look better than the one that we watched because that one just seemed especially not like high resolution.
Yeah, I think my
uh
DVD is actually better, believe it or not.
yeah, probably no, I don't doubt it. So yeah, I think there's probably just not enough demand that
Mm.
they would even bother to go back and rescan it. So I think that probably would have helped with there's some really grainy shots. Like
Oh
again, when
yes.
there's not a lot of lights, it's bound to be grainy. But like when she was on top of the lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
like those shots in particular, I was like,
Oh, those were like,
man,
wow, so grainy.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could see
Or
every
like,
speck.
you remember like at the very beginning when the guys get killed and they zoom in on his
Yeah.
face? Like that was
Uh-huh.
so like it was just black everywhere else except for like the red mark like on his face, like the red lighting. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like you can literally pick out every single speck of film grain.
Yeah, but it just might be the scan. So I
Yeah.
would be curious to get my hands on a different copy to see if maybe like the quality is a little bit
Mhm.
better. But
I'll
not
dig up the
I don't
DVD.
think very detrimental to the experience because I'm used to watching grainy B movies that don't have very good scans. So
Mhm.
it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah. I definitely think it's I can almost guarantee it's probably a demand thing. There's whenever I bring up the
Yeah.
fog to
Well, yeah,
people, like
because
a
you can
lot of people
go
don't even
yeah.
know it's like a movie. They're like, with a what?
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. Like they're like, do you
Because you
mean the
can
mist?
go
And I'm like, no, not
yeah.
the mist. With the fog.
Yeah, I think Taco said something about the mist in
Yeah,
the
he did.
chat. But like if you can go and find a copy of Halloween, which came out a couple years before, and it looks
Hmm.
way better than this
Oh
because
yeah,
just again the demand for people to see Halloween in a higher resolution is there, so they've been doing it. Uh,
yeah.
so I would like to see a better looking scan of it eventually,
I'll
but
dig up the DVD.
yeah, because
But
I
I
wonder if they even have it on
Actually, that's a
Blu-ray.
good. Okay, yeah, we're referencing that right there. Actually, so again, DVD. My dad got at Walmart for like in one of the $4 bins. So there's your
Mhm.
demand, right? Like
Yeah.
that's to demonstrate. You'd probably almost never see the Halloween movie in a bin like that. It's probably sitting on the shelf somewhere. You know what I mean? For the most
Yeah.
part, unless it's like not Halloween time or something like that, and like the sales, they're just trying to like sell off a lot of copies of something.
Mhm.
Like maybe they throw it in a bin finally, but the fog was just like something that was like, I mean, there was a ton of them apparently in this bin. My dad said, so he was like, I'm just gonna try this, you know, like it sounds
Yeah.
interesting. That's what he said when he came home with it. So like to me personally, like yeah, that's definitely a showing of like the demand for it. And I mean, is that bad? No, I mean that kind of sucks for John Carpenter in a way, but
Oh, he's
because I
doing
think it's
just
a good,
fine.
but
I
he's
wouldn't
doing
worry
just
about John
fine.
Carpenter.
Yeah, I don't think one movie ruined it. So,
No.
but that's definitely probably why we don't get a good like a good scan now because
Yeah.
not a
Because
call
what
for
has
it.
to happen is that, a company like Criterion and they
It
have
has
to
to be worth
go
it.
yeah, and they're just like, well, people buy this if we go and we put all this effort into doing a new scan and maybe fixing some of the damage to whatever film we're scanning it from.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I'd be interesting to see if like the original negatives are actually out there somewhere of the fog.
I mean, 1980 is not that long ago, and I think hopefully by that point they learned about film preservation because film preservation was neglected for honestly
Hmm.
a longer time than you'd think. Um, like, because The Godfather, the negatives of that were like completely destroyed.
Really?
That was like, what year was that? Like 70 something, 72?
Yeah, I think so. Right around that.
So, even around then they weren't taking film preservation seriously. So to say 10 years later, like, 10 or 20 years later they were, I don't know. It was mostly Scorsese, who, and I think it was mostly in the 90s, who was the big proponent of film preservation. And then everybody hopped on board, including Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, I don't know, a bunch of other people. And that's when film preservation really kicked into high gear because people were realizing that these great films are being lost almost like to time. So it's kind of hard to say. It just depends on at the time whether or not they were ever thinking about keeping the negative preserved. Because basically, what happens with a negative is that you just keep making copies from it, and then it just deteriorates over time. So if you're just
Hmm.
like, make another copy of it, send it to the theater, it's like it's gonna wear out. And also, if you just keep it in, you don't keep it cool enough. If it's too warm, it can deteriorate, or you just gotta keep it in the right temperature. If you go to like a place that takes film preservation really seriously, they got like giant refrigerators filled with film reels. Um, so yeah, I think it depends if John Carpenter decided to, put the effort into preserving it, but at the time, a kind of, cheesy horror movie, it's possible that they weren't thinking of that.
Hmm. So, anyways, I ended up finding. I was trying to see if there was a negative thing online,
Mhm.
and I came up 12 clear facts about John Carpenter's The Fog. So
Uh-huh.
apparently The Fog was inspired by several creepy British things. Um,
Is that a
and
show? What was that?
what?
What did you say? Can you
I
repeat
think
that?
just creepy British things in general. Because it's gonna. So it
Oh,
says Stonehenge for one in 1977 when Carpenter and his co-writer Deborah Hill were in England promoting assault on Precinct 13. They visited the ancient Ring of Stones and were struck by an eerie, foggy, mysterious atmosphere.
oh, okay.
Carpenter was also inspired by the Trollenberg Terror in 1958 British film released in the US as the Crawling Eye, in which creatures hid inside the mist.
Hmm. I've never heard of that.
So that was some stuff. He also was urged apparently in the making of this to include some sort of like blood and gore in it, so it has more than Halloween
Yeah,
apparently.
Halloween is really sparse.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And so he said that he was inspired by Cronenberg's The Brood.
I haven't seen The Brood, but that's a pretty early Cronenberg film.
Yeah.
There's a lot of early Cronenberg movies I just haven't seen. There's like that. There's Shivers. Um, I think the crazy is that Cronenberg? Maybe not. The Crazies isn't, but I think Rabid
Also,
is another one.
the old guy that we love so much at the beginning, the creepy British like
Oh yeah,
man that tells the story. He was like an afterthought. They decided that the movie wasn't working the way it was, so they did like a rough cut of that man doing like that voiceover, like this like campfire story, and then they just like stitched it into the beginning of the
yeah.
movie,
I really like that opening
which is
shot, the
interesting.
sweat diopter with the stopwatch, and he like slams
And
it
it just
shut.
goes.
Yeah. There was a weird I can't even tell you what it was. It was like a weird zoom where it looked like a bunch of frames were just like chopped up and like spliced together like super like made it was so jarring, but just interesting, I guess. I don't know if you've ever seen
The
anything
Fog
like
was
that.
also worked on with both his wife and his ex girlfriend at the time.
Oh, okay.
Oddly enough, interestingly enough, actually. Uh,
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much more to say about it.
One key example of those applied in the movie, the novel makes it clear that the six who must die are descendants of the. Okay. So this was kind of something that I think a lot of people could overlook. So actually I think it is important to talk about. But anyways, there was a novel of the fog that was done
I
by Dennis
assumed, yeah.
Exton. He did the same thing for Halloween. He wrote the same paperback novelization after Halloween came out or whatever before had to be after.
Right.
Um, but basically, they're saying that it made better sense in the book, essentially afterwards. Um, but through the movie, it's implied. Basically, the idea was that the six must die are the original six, who basically are descendants.
Yeah, well that's what the priest was talking about.
So yeah, so like all the people that died, even in the movie, are descendants.
Oh, okay. Got you.
It's just implied in the movie. In the book, it's actually like specified.
Well, I think again, the priest says one point he's like they want me. I'm the sixth one. Like
Hmm.
so. Yeah, they don't talk about it too much though. It really only comes up at that very end scene. Seems like when they're reading that book. Yeah, I'm not sure I have much more to say about it. If you like
Oh
John Carpenter
shit.
films, then you should go see it
Hang
because you'll
on,
probably like
I
it.
have to add something now. This is actually getting juicy. I actually like these like tips. I didn't realize this. So the exact thing we talked about with Jamie Lee Curtis being like a secondary role.
Hmm.
Okay, so basically what happened was is after the success of Halloween, they experienced a not so unusual phenomenon with actors basically expecting to get starring roles
Hmm.
because it was so successful, and instead all she ended up with was like guest appearances on The Love Boat and Buck Rogers. And so she was getting like wicked discouraged. So
Yeah.
Carpenter sympathized for her and just added a role into the fog just for her. So that's
Oh,
why she
okay.
just feels like a backup, like a secondary.
Yeah, just thrown in. Yeah.
So that
Okay.
was kind of interesting. She was dubbed. Wait, what? The Fog was still in post production. The three movies being released back in the 1980s led to Curtis being dubbed cinema's new Scream Queen.
Yeah,
Apparently,
she
didn't
was one of the
realize that.
first. Yeah.
Um, John Carpenter. Oh wait. Oh my God, I didn't even realize that. Did you say something? No, you must not have. Did you
What?
realize that the church janitor at the beginning was John Carpenter?
I was not. He's so. I'm used to old John Carpenter. I was not paying attention
Oh my
because you're
God.
probably
I
right,
just
but
didn't even
yeah.
realize that. Apparently, he was
Yeah.
so displeased with his own performance in the fog that he never casted himself again. That's what he
That's
says.
funny.
So, but I just didn't realize that.
Yeah, I
It
just
was,
wasn't paying attention because I think the movie was just starting and I was getting situated.
he said that Carpenter said it was one of the most terrifying moments in his life. This is a quote from him. Having to deliver these lines to an accomplished actor. His final verdict on his own performance, I'm terrible, so I stopped doing roles as the movie after this movie except for helicopter pilots and walk-ons.
Yeah. That's like an Alfred
Totally
Hitchcock
interesting.
cameo. He's always carrying an instrument. You know that? That like Alfred Hitchcock in every one of his movies is just like walking by in one scene.
Really? I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, he's always carrying some sort of instrument.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but No, I understand. Acting in front of a camera and then seeing yourself, and you're like, oh my god, leave this to somebody else.
Yeah, this isn't for me. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I still do it, but that's the try. It's more of a trying to improve my own skills.
the
And
also the moment when the priest jumps out from the dark like corner,
yeah,
that could still be seen in the shot apparently, in the initial like take of it. So John Carpenter had to actually like darken that part of the frame and post
yeah, you
to
can
keep him
definitely do that.
concealed, which is
Hmm.
kind of interesting, just an added thing.
Yeah.
Um, every ghost arm that is seen in the fog belongs to one guy. I kind of thought that.
At one point, I thought they were fake arms, like the ones that
That's what
were
I mean.
bursting
There
through the
was
church
some of them,
windows and
yeah.
looked kind of like animatronic like. But I guess it was just a guy, like a lot of prosthetics on
It
the
was
arms.
Wallace, which is
Wallace.
the same guy that plays Michael Myers.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
every single arm scene smashing through each of the windows is Wallace's arm, just going through windows.
Okay.
So, anyways, I think that's kind of it.
Mhm.
The simple reason why the Fog's radio station plays smooth jazz. I think that was just to add, right? I don't know. Let's read this. Would be so popular in a small town. It's much cheaper for filmmakers to get the right to generic jazz recordings than
Yeah,
say
that's what I was
popular
gonna
rocks.
say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up. I mean, I have to agree. I think if you like John Carpenter, I think check it out. See if you
Yeah.
like it. It's not
Or just that
worth
kind
a
of
binge.
era of horror movies.
Yeah, the
If
slasher
you like
genre.
Halloween, if you like Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Friday the
if you like
13th.
Friday the Third, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
that was kind of
No, yeah, yeah, yeah. Friday the 13th is
yeah, I
pretty.
guess so.
The first one is very kind of bog standard slasher.
Yeah.
The rest of them are
Scream.
too, I guess. Well,
Well,
Scream is
Scream's
like a
more of
kind
a
of
comedy, but
that's a satire,
yeah.
honestly, of horror movies. Because at that point, that's 20 years after
Mhm.
you know
See, that would have
slashers
been
have been
cool.
popular.
Okay, so the one thing I gotta say is Scream, like the whole door going up and having the chick inside like the little doggy door. That's something that I wish the Fog had done, something like that, where people are getting killed
Yeah,
by like weird, like means. You know what I mean? As
yeah.
opposed to just every single like shot, like you had said, being like them being like sliced.
They just
But
kind of
again,
rip them
it
apart.
was
Yeah.
really a good movie. Like I don't know, it wasn't bad at all. Like I think
No, no.
the
I would,
the worst
like, I would,
characteristics are the good
I would
ones. So
rewatch it, like, just I would. I don't know. I guess what I was gonna say with that. I would rewatch it. Just
yeah.
generally, I
Mm.
wouldn't mind putting it on and just sitting down and watching it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. It's nostalgic for me
Mhm.
too. So, anyways,
But
guys, that's gonna wrap it up for the junk box. I think, unless you have
mhm.
anything adding remarks.
I was just gonna say it's definitely not his best movie, but not even close to his worst.
No, definitely not. I
And
agree.
as far as bad John Carpenter movies go, there's not a lot of them. So
True.
I
John
think again,
Carpenter is really good.
I think Escape from L.A. Honestly, I see. This is a half baked opinion because I did not watch the whole thing. I started Escape from L.A. and I immediately bailed. I
Really.
was like, I'm fucking out of here. I don't want to watch this. So, yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's all I gotta say. We can end it now.
Okay. Yeah, so guys, that was Junkbox episode 7. We'll be back on next week, I think Tuesday. Most likely. I don't think I have anything going on Tuesday. So we'll be on
Uh,
Tuesday 6 to 9. I don't know what our plan is. We'll probably just end up doing another movie review. I mean, these are enjoyable. I think these are a lot of fun.
yeah, I
So,
get to watch movies.
yeah, I get to watch movies and then review them. I mean, what's